I'm gonna be honest, I've been a long-time follower of Yahtzeecraft for the best part of 10 years or so. Zero punctuation makes for an entertaining flash fire of snarky criticism. The fondly remembered Let's Drown Out and Ego review videos are fairly easy to listen to if you're in the mood for a podcast. And hell, I even own some of his books. How often is it that you see a book about man-eating jam? Sure, The Blob has a similar thing going for it, but jam? That's dumb fun that I can get behind. So yeah, shoot me, I enjoy Croshaw's work. And when the Dev Diary Challenge came around, I was looking forward to it. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but pre-fight panic and the cleaner makes for fun entertainment. The life of Eric's arm was interesting, even if the control system could be a little infuriating at times. As for BRTV, it really reminds me of that old Flash game where it's just dots and colours simulating a zombie outbreak, which is apparently extremely hard to find these days. No amount of early 2000s Flash zombie simulator was getting me anywhere. No. Anyway, out of all the games to come out of the Dev Diary Challenge, Some Things in the Sea easily took top place for me. So for the first non-story video of the channel, I'm gonna dive into it a little bit. And no, I'm not sorry. At its core, Some Things in the Sea is probably best described as a bite-sized Lovecraft light. Following a passenger plane's crash into the middle of the ocean, you take control of the sole survivor, who just so happens to have lucked out and snagged himself a working lifeboat, with a fully functioning outboard motor, no less. I'd offer a spoiler warning for the foreseeable future, but truthfully there's not a massive amount that can be spoiled. You never find out anything about this person, their life story or purpose within the game's lore. It doesn't really play any part here, and honestly it doesn't really matter. That's not why we're here. That's why we're here. I'm getting War of the Worlds flashbacks. Anyway, after commandeering your newfound vessel and collecting the floating artifact, you're tasked with an extremely simple objective. Dive. Your job is simple. Collect the remaining pieces scattered throughout the depths below. After grabbing a few, you'll start to notice that your overall movement speed and held breath capacity gradually increases, which comes in handy when attempting to snag the artifacts that might be much further down. Movement controls are standard and feel pretty tanky at the best of times. You use the arrow keys to propel yourself in the desired direction, turning left or right awkwardly in the hopes that it's enough to get you where you want to go before time runs out. And that's about it. There's no double tap up to quickly shift direction or anything like that. It's kept simple, and honestly that works just fine. Underwater levels tend to have a special place in gaming history as clunky, irritating affairs, so to overcomplicate a title that exists entirely within that spectrum with Aquaman level water aerobics might have spoiled the atmosphere just a little bit. And honestly, the atmosphere is where Some Things in the Sea really shines. I'm a huge sucker for atmosphere. There's a reason the thick smog of Silent Hill eternally remains my favourite place to be, or the miserably cruel Swedish winter of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, or just kicking back and enjoying the batshit insanity of the delightfully horrible Courage the Cowardly Dog. It's intoxicating, and I love it. I love it very much. So your first dive probably goes a little something along the lines of this. Once taking the plunge, you delve deeper and deeper into the gradually darkening surroundings, perhaps following the pathway of the sinking plane as a point of reference. The further you go, the more the camera slowly pulls away, emphasising the sheer scale of the ocean around you, and the only company you are afforded are the repeated gurglings of bubbles and sloshes of water. As you dive further, the shimmering green of artifacts and the occasional blue of bioluminescence offers some small sense of direction, but as far as introductory gameplay goes, it's pretty isolating. The idea of bobbing helplessly in the middle of the open ocean with little to no hope of rescue is terrifying enough. The minimalist sound design particularly feels reminiscent of 2001: A Space Odyssey, in particular the spacewalk scenes, a similarly inspired sound design shared with previous Croshaw title, 7 Days a Skeptic. It's effective, and does exactly what's needed to set an appropriate tone for a lonely swim, whilst collecting supernatural Lovecraftian MacGuffins. Of course, to feel completely lonely would be to feel completely alone, which you are not. So, joining you for a quick dip is an appropriately unexplained beast of Lovecraftian-like proportions, a horror concept I myself can't help but adore. It is with extremely shameful hang of my head that I admit having written a similarly inspired horror story of my own, with nearly the same exact name for So, whilst pursuing the more elusive artifacts, you soon run into pesky tentacles that want to drown you, pesky claws that want to snap you, and even peskier bubbles that want to toss your sorry form back into the ocean again. It does not feel like it, Mr. Croshaw. Truthfully, this is where 90% of the game's actual challenge stems from. The tentacles provide an irritating hindrance when snagging you at less than welcome moments, yet also provide an effective express elevator to the deepest depths of the ocean if you don't mind losing a chunk of held breath in doing so. Alternatively, the crab claws offer instant death if they do manage to catch you, but also offer one of the game's more hilariously clunky animations as they plummet lifelessly when unsuccessful. It's worth noting at this point that something of a life system does exist within the game, so you are afforded a few extra chances if need be. Just don't forget. And so, through sheer will and extraordinary tenacity, you eventually collect the missing pieces, which brings us neatly to the final boss of the game. Thankfully, your Lovecraftian MacGuffin is here to provide cheerleading support, so it's not nearly as desperate as it could be. The goal is simple. After the giant crustacean-looking fellow has risen from his slumber, your task is to aim the MacGuffin laser pen into his eyeball, and blind the poor bastard before he can knock you from the boat and kill you. And this is where the boss battle can be a little frustrating. Okay. One last dip before sailing home, I suppose. Yeah, it's a good thing we were able to... If I'm supposed to know what this thing is, it is zoomed high above my head, I am sorry to say. True, it's relatively Xenomorph meets Cthulhu in execution, and the horror of a cruel, mysterious sentient creature ripping through your helpless being is an effectively tried and tested concept. But whatever the explanation might be if yielded from Croshaw's headcanon, it isn't offered here. And again, as stated beforehand, that's fine. Sure, I could sit and speculate on the nature of the peculiar circumstances the main character finds themselves in. For one, following something as monumentally disastrous as a plane crash, they are immediately more than willing to collect multiple pieces of something. And for what? Personal gain? Spiritual comfort? Appeasement to a higher being? Why is this character's first and only objective not to speed his precariously unprepared vessel toward the nearest possibility of land, and instead decides to spend his evening playing tag with Cthulhu? That would send me on my way. Thank you, good sir, for the opportunity in putting Lovecraftian Humpty Dumpty back together again, but I'm sorry that the insurance company will be unhappy with the missing, likely centuries-old cargo that we were keeping tucked amongst the suitcases. But I am not, for lack of a better manner of expressing such a fact, paid enough for this shit. The ocean is a deep, dark, scary place, full of many a creepy creature that can haunt an imaginative person's wildest dreams. Forget Finding friggin' Nemo. I'm talking some David Attenborough level crap that wants nothing more to do than chow down on the nearest dead whale that happens to float on by. No thank you. To recap, this game is effective. A lot more effective with headphones on in a dark room for sure, but regardless, effective nonetheless. Sure, it's brief and relatively straightforward in nature and design. Honestly, you'll probably have some things in the sea beat in 10 to 15 minutes. but it's important to remember how heavily dependent the game was on a limited development window. It was never going to be the papers please of seafaring Lovecraftian horror, nor written with the similarly extensive text box style adventure qualities that bolster the Consuming Shadows background lore, a game that took Croshaw a handful of years to complete. And again, that's okay. It would have been too much to expect. The project was developed from the very beginning within the boundaries of a time constraint, and this was always clear. Had Yahtzee afforded himself all the development time he could wish for, especially considering some of the more arcade-style dev diary entries, it wouldn't have been surprising to see Some Things in the Sea grow into a far more level-by-level affair, perhaps going so far as to share thematic qualities with the Consuming Shadow, a concept that Croshaw himself humoured in the final dev diary roundup video. Perhaps Some Things in the Sea's spiritual successor might have been a little more Consuming Shadow meets Abe's Odyssey, within the realms of Lovecraftian nautical horrors, of course, in which the protagonist proceeds through levels as the creature pursues him towards an endgame goal. The shore, maybe? Sure, being stuck in the middle of the ocean probably renders that idea unlikely, but it's a start. Perhaps as the game continues, the character might also proceed to develop further abilities to more effectively resist the creature, whilst also rescuing the odd survivor of the same plane crash, perhaps whilst also contending with new creatures as the plot continues, or learning a more extensive backstory of the unnamed protagonist. Well, who knows? The Dev Diary series remains open-ended to continue in some form or another, so perhaps Some Things in the Sea will grow into something more extensive sometime down the line. Although it would appear that Yahtzee's heart is currently set on exploring the Cleaners gameplay loop more thoroughly, before any other title is offered further development at the very least. Regardless, Some Things in the Sea still stands as a great example of staying true to simple yet effective gameplay, and it offers 15 to 20 easily replayable minutes of bite-sized Lovecraftian light horror. And you know what, that's enough for me. Thank you for watching.